Please be seated. You may remember a movie from the 1980s called The Bonfire of the Vanities. It was a movie about Wall Street greed. But you may not remember that it gets its name from something that happened a long time before that, in the 15th century. Back then, there was an Italian priest who literally made bonfires of all things that he felt were vain pursuits, things that led to idleness, self-absorption, drunkenness, greed, and so on. And when he made these fires and he had people to bring all this stuff, they burned up all sorts of things like makeup, mirrors, games, paintings, musical instruments, and books. It comes perilously close to the image of those book burnings in the 1930s, especially since a lot of what this guy burned was taken forcibly. And it's sort of painful to know that some of the paintings he burned were Botticelli's and things like that. But the excess and the perversion of an idea does not mean that there isn't something positive in the seed of that idea. You see, the idea was to eliminate from one's life all the things that were separating us from God. The big problem is that a lot of the time, and our scriptures point to this today, the biggest obstacle between us and God isn't all the things, it's us. Or at least our self-absorption. Here's what I mean. If we look at Ecclesiastes, which is purportedly written by Solomon, we see a man who has it all. He has money. He has power. He has talent. He has education. He has women. And believe me, if it's Solomon, he's got a lot of women. And he has admirers everywhere. Not only that, but according to the book, he has checked off at least 3 lifetimes worth of bucket lists and still finds no joy in life. Why is that? Well, in the end, he comes to the sad conclusion that it's because he's been a self-absorbed jerk. Everything has been about him. His money, his power, his knowledge, his experiences, his search for meaning in life. He must conclude that his focus has been on what the world could do for him, and it leaves him empty. Jesus tells a similar story from a different angle. It starts out when someone in the crowd asks Jesus to intervene in a conflict about an inheritance. Jesus, make my brother split the inheritance with me properly. It's basically, I didn't get my fair share. You may be familiar with some of the trials and tribulations that happen on the death of a parent when siblings get together and start to divide things up. Sadly, it's not uncommon that siblings who normally love each other start fighting over who got what. This may be why for many years my parents had a bumper sticker on their car that read, "I'm spending my children's inheritance." But in truth, it is an issue. I didn't get mine. I want mine. Which is why Jesus then tells a story about a rich man who thinks he's got it all and needs more. The guy's response to recognizing that he has it all is to make plans to build these barns so he can put more in there. And what's he going to do with it all? Eat, drink, and be merry. Spend it on himself. Focus on himself. He has no need for more other than he feels like he needs it. And probably that he deserves it. His focus is on nothing but himself and his drive to have more. None of these stories is about wealth per se. The Bible doesn't actually condemn those who have wealth. It condemns what they do with it. It condemns how they see it. And it condemns the self-absorption. These stories aren't about the things. The stories are about that self-centeredness. They are stories of what happens when our focus turns away from how do we relate to each other? And they turn to what's in it for me? The man in Jesus' story didn't care about the grain itself or the mouths it could feed. What he cared about was having more. What he cared about was eat, drink, and be merry. And those kids in the gospel, the ones who were arguing about the inheritance, they probably didn't need it. They probably had enough to get by. They'd been taught how to make it in the world. But they were certain that they were going to get their fair share. And Solomon, if it was Solomon, all through this book, he tells how what he was looking for was his own satisfaction. The thing is, this whole mentality of what's in it for me, or it's all about me, or I'm the one that counts. Look out for number one. This mentality leads to a dead soul. I mean, look, none of these self-absorbed fools were really happy, were they? Solomon? Nope. Those siblings? They were at each other's throats. The rich farmer? Constantly worried about increasing production, and he'll get to the celebration later on, and when he does, it'll only be himself, but he's never gotten to it. Because why? He dies. He discovers too late that it was a wasted effort. We all die. That's one thing I can promise. And someone else will inherit and make their own mistakes with whatever we leave behind. In the end, we lose control. We discover that we are merely dust, and we learn that it is not all about us. So, if all is vanity, what's the point? Why bother? What is life about at all? And Jesus gives the answer in that last little line of today's story. He says the answer is being rich toward God. Boy, do I wish this passage came about during stewardship season, because then everybody'd start getting nervous and they'd double their pledges. But in reality, richness toward God isn't so much about money. It's about focus. It's about letting go of the things that drag you away from God. What we could all use is a way to let go of those things to make us that make us so self-absorbed, so that we can broaden our view, so we can look beyond ourselves. We need something, or we could at least use something to release that inheritance, or that need for power, or the thrill-seeking, or the compulsion to accumulate. What we could really use is a sort of bonfire of the vanities. or maybe not quite. Remembering that those bonfires of the 15th century, those were forced upon others. We don't need to go there. But it's summer, sort of camping season. So maybe we can have our own metaphorical campfire of the Vanities. Doesn't that sound like a nice idea? Having your campfire of the Vanities, sitting around there, very cozy, comfortable, looking at the things in your life that separate you from each other and from God. Clearly, I am not suggesting that you literally burn your stuff. Do not mistake me. But do imagine yourself sitting around that fire and taking those things that are yours, that cause you to look inward all the time, not spiritually inward, but self-absorbed inward. Looking those things, holding them up to the campfire light with a critical eye, and asking, does this separate me from others? Does this lay a bigger claim on my attention than God? It could be very freeing to place in your own metaphorical fire, and I reiterate, metaphorical, but to place in that metaphorical fire those things that make you self-absorbed and that drag you away from what really matters. Could be a good thing. But before you get there, before you can examine your life, you have to be willing to build that fire. So let that be our question today. Am I willing to build my campfire of the Vanities? Because it might just be the thing that saves my life. Amen.